Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, a podcast that explores divorce, separation and co-parenting here in the UK, countering the often sensationalist way it's portrayed in the media, challenging the status quo and driving for reform. On each episode, I'm joined by experts to discuss divorce, separation and co-parenting from different angles. I'm Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor and divorce coach, co-founder of Amicable and host of the Divorce Podcast. In this episode, we're joined by Tamsin Caine. Tamsin has a background of over 15 years in financial services. She began Smart Divorce following her own experience with divorce. Smart Divorce provides bespoke divorce financial planning services to those who are faced with navigating the challenges of divorce, separation, or dissolving a civil partnership. Tamsin now advises people in the same situation as she once found herself in, helping and empowering them to take back control of their life and their finances. Welcome, Tamsin.
Hi, Kate. Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to see you again, Tamsin, and it's great that we have the opportunity to have a real in-depth dive into financial planning around divorce. I know from speaking to you before that yours has been a personal journey in terms of setting up the Smart Divorce. Tell me a little bit about what led you to where you've got to now.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly has been a personal journey. So really the history is of two very contrasting experiences of divorce. So the first being my parents separating and divorcing when I was 12, which was not a particularly pleasant experience. My parents have now, my mother has recently celebrated her silver wedding anniversary to my stepfather. So as you can see, it was quite a considerable length of time ago. And her and my dad are still unable to be in the same room at the same time. So from that awkwardness, and then experiencing my own divorce, we separated just over 6 years ago. And we were very keen to ensure that our divorce was not like that, was amicable, that we continued to be able to both be parents to our two children, and that we could both be involved in their lives and play a significant part to be there when the important things in their lives happened.
So it sounds like then, from your perspective, getting the finances in order and understanding the finances are one of the sort of keys to keeping things amicable. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what your experiences are, but I think in my experience, the two big things that people fight about are access to the children or the time spent with the children and the money. And if you can sort those two things out without ending up in a big bun fight, without spending stupid amounts of money going to court, then actually co-parenting your children together in the future is got to be much easier.
Mm. So then, if you're starting at the very beginning of this, what would you say are the key financial considerations? What do you need to have a handle on to be able to keep things amicable, but to obviously understand from a financial perspective what you need to accomplish in order to get a fair split of the assets?
So I would start by saying it's not about just giving up and giving the other person everything that they want. It is about getting a fair settlement, because otherwise there'll just be animosity underlying underneath if you don't feel that you've had a fair outcome. So the starting point would be to understand what all the financial products are that you have between you and separately. So, have you got pensions? Have you got a house together? Have you got mortgage? Have you got any debts? Have you got other property? Have you got savings, investments? And collect all those things together. And then understand what you need in order to move forward. So do a personal budget, but make it reasonable and not just, I'm used to having XYZ and therefore I want that in the future. If money's been quite tight in the past when you've been together and living in one house, when you move into living in two houses, there's probably not going to be quite as much as there was before, and some of those luxuries may not be affordable from day one. So it's being kind of realistic about what your future looks like. But that's definitely, those things would be the starting points.
And it's a really good point you made at the beginning of that, which was that being amicable doesn't mean rolling over. Because I think sometimes people confuse that, don't you? You can come out with an amicable kind of agreement at the end of it, but there might have been some toing and froing in order to get there. It's not that you just have to lie down and take what the first proposal that someone gives you. It sounds like the key thing here is really understanding first what you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. What you've got and what you both need, because
Yeah.
in the majority of divorces, you are going to be looking at needs. There are, we're not all Brad and Angelina, and we don't all have multi-million pounds in the bank. And certainly the majority of clients that I work with, we are looking at divorce on a needs basis. So it is about what you both need and how you can move forward together and understand that it feels, you might not be doing cartwheels in the garden when you've come to your agreed solution, but as long as you can move forward and you've both got enough to do that, then that should be enough, I guess. Yeah, so that's what we'd be looking for.
So it sounds like that expectation management, managing your own expectations that life will be different. That sounds quite key. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes we get people where perhaps in the divorce discussions, it's the other person who's, in quotes, to blame. And therefore, the person who's not taking the blame feels often quite entitled to maintain a lifestyle. And sometimes that's just not possible. How do you go about explaining that to somebody?
Crikey, yeah. Quite often, one feels entitled to maintain their lifestyle but doesn't necessarily have the finances to do it. And the other feels entitled to hang on to all of their money because they're the breadwinner. And getting over that conversation can certainly be tricky. And, there are circumstances where they're not in an emotional place to do that. And actually that becomes something that they just can't agree on. But I think in the majority of cases where the couple do actually genuinely want to work towards an amicable settlement, then you can show them what the difference looks like. If you show one person, look, this is the position you will be in, and this is the position that your ex will be in, and they look dramatically different, then there usually can be some element of compromise. And I think it's starting off on the foot that you are going to need to compromise. That's a massive part of being able to have an amicable settlement, I think. And also the alternative to going down this route and to sorting things out between you and to sorting things out through your fantastic service, the alternative is to go to court. And there isn't a fees fairy that will come and pay all your divorce fees for you. It comes out of the pot. So you're spending your money in order to go and fight for something that may or may not end up in your pot, and quite often isn't going to end up giving you any more because you've spent so much fighting it in court. So sometimes that explanation can aid discussions, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? Sometimes the cost of pursuing something slightly different way outstrips the benefit that you'll gain from it. And even if you take just the finance out of it, the emotional journey you have to go on to go through a court just can leave you in a position of kind of no return, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a judge, and I wish I could find out which judge it was that said it, but I can't for the life of me find it on Google, which is obviously the place that we all go to for these things. But there was a judge who said that if a settlement comes out and either party is happy with it, then it was probably the wrong settlement. So I quite often quote
Yes, I like that.
as I really wish I could find out. Perhaps some judge who hears this will tell me that it was them that said it. That would be really useful. But yeah, I quite often start off the conversation by saying, look, this is a situation you are unlikely to be happy with the outcome of this. but it is about being able to move forward and being aware that you've got enough to move forward.
Yeah. So knowing what you've got, knowing what you need, managing your expectations, these seem to be the themes coming through so far, don't they, in terms of, how you need to approach a financial discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just interested in what you were saying as well about the idea of going to court on finances. And one of the things I know that we find quite a lot is people's expectation of the court is sometimes quite different to the reality. And often I hear people say, well, I can't trust my ex to disclose all of their income or all of their assets or that kind of thing, but they would have to in court. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on that, because it doesn't seem to me that you fare any better in the court if you're ordered to disclose and you choose not to, that unless you're going to spend tens or hundreds even of thousands of pounds going through a forensic accountant, it doesn't really strike me that you get any better a deal in court. What would you say?
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with you there. I think that you are asked to disclose, you are asked to provide bank statements and company accounts and pay slips and so on, whichever way you go through this. And if somebody really wants to hide money, they will do it. And as you say, it's going to be a question of forensic accountants, which, as you say, can cost tens and tens of thousands of pounds. And it is a question of weighing up whether you suspect or you have sufficient evidence to suggest that the amount of money that's being hidden is worth the amount of money that you need to pay in order to get it. If you think they might have hidden £3,000 in an ISA somewhere, it's probably not worth pursuing through a forensic accountant. If you suspect there's a couple of million in an offshore company somewhere and you have enough sort of supporting evidence to back that up, then I think you might well think that a forensic accountant was worth their weight in gold.
You see, that's a really interesting explanation because it's a very rational explanation. And of course, it's the right one. But so often with divorces, we're not just dealing with rational decision making, are we? We've got the emotional overlay feeding into this. And so very often, the idea of having to accept that somebody might be hiding something is just a bridge too far for some people. But actually, when you explain it in terms of the cost benefit of pursuing something, it becomes a lot clearer, doesn't it? It's just sometimes you do have to accept that people aren't being thorough in their disclosure, but the cost of you pursuing it and trying to bring them to account may be cost prohibitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could lose out in the long run, if you were wrong and that money isn't there or isn't found, then it could have cost you a huge amount of money in exchange for nothing. So yeah, but it is like you say that, the emotions get involved and you don't want to think that someone's getting away with hiding money from you. It's a perfectly understandable, logical response. And I think one of the things that we talked about last time we spoke was about the emotional support throughout the divorce that I know that you provide. And I would certainly suggest that anybody that is going through divorce needs to have emotional support probably before they start endeavoring to make any decisions, and quite often throughout the process, because however amicable you end up, it's certainly an emotional roller coaster. Yes, we managed to achieve an emotional settlement in my case, but it certainly wasn't a flat line. Every day was roses and we were all happy as Larry the whole time. We had massive ups and downs throughout.
Yes, and the timing of those ups and downs and the timing of the financial negotiations can sometimes be quite critical, can't they?
Yeah.
How do you help people look at the finances in a different way, Tamsin? So how do you assist somebody, let's say it's somebody who hasn't been particularly au fait with the finances in the past. How do you get them started on this sort of financial enlightenment journey?
I love the idea of it being a financial enlightenment.
Well, it is really, isn't it? Because if you've not done it before and you're going to be single, this is the training ground, isn't it, for the rest of your life? I'm not saying you might not. I'm not saying you might always stay single, but you're going to be single for a period of time. You've got to manage your finances for the next period of time. So for some people, I think it is a bit of a journey that they start here, a journey to independence. So what sort of things can you help them with in that scenario?
Oh yeah, please be that even if they aren't single forevermore, that they get more involved in the finances from that point on. So, when you're married, it's a team and teams play to their strengths. And so what you will normally find is that one person takes more of a role in the finances. They will be the one who researches the car insurance, who perhaps changes the bank accounts, who looks after the investments or savings if they've got any. Everything is tends to be, and I'm using the word controlled, but I don't mean controlled in a bad way necessarily, but it tends to be looked after by one person. And on divorce, all of a sudden, there's the other person who then finds themselves in an even more fearful position because they've never done any of this bill paying or financial research before, and they probably actually don't really understand how to look after money. So it's a big part of what we do when we start working with a client is a bit of an education piece. So we help them to put together their budget. We help them to understand what things cost and what things they're going to need to pay for moving forward. We help them to understand some of the financial products they've got. So they might have a pension, but they don't really understand what it does or what it is or how it works. And the same with other investments that they might have. So there's quite a big education piece to do to help people to start managing their finances moving forward.
Yes. And do you work with just people individually, or can you work with couples?
No, we can work with couples as well.
What would you say then are the differences between, what you do and say what a lawyer does? So you can work with couples, obviously a lawyer can't. What are the other differences? Why would somebody go and invest in a lawyer versus getting some good sound financial advice?
So lawyers are fantastic with the legal side of things, and I'm not a lawyer, so that side of things is not my forte. But I am really, really good with finances, and I can help people to understand different financial products, but I can also help them to see what a proposed settlement might look like. So, for example, if a lawyer says, well, I think we should go for 60% of the house and 70% of this pension, and we should go for maintenance of X amount per year. If you're not used to looking after the finances, you have absolutely no idea what that means in terms of your lifestyle. So what we would do is we would build a picture, and it's an actual physical picture. It has blue on it, which means good, and red on it, which means not so good. And we would show you what that settlement actually looks like in terms of your lifestyle and how that plays out for the rest of your life, and what you would need to do to plug any gaps in it, so that you can feel, well, that looks realistic, I can deal with that, or actually that's not going to work at all because there are too many shortfalls, there are too many things that we can't compromise on, or even maybe a restructure of the offer that's been made. So, for example, there are shortfalls at the beginning, but actually they've got absolutely masses of pensions, so they need to just switch those around a little bit. And a lawyer doesn't tend to have the experience and that availability of being able to financially model those things.
So it sounds like you're stress testing options, which is a really good way of getting people to stop looking at the bottom line number of X% and start thinking about it in terms of, does it fulfill what I need? Or how we would say it, does it meet my goals?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah. What do you want your life to look like in the future? And can you accept what's being offered? Or, do you need to go on and fight further, or actually would this work for you?
So I like this because it takes away that awful word fair, doesn't it? So we get so hung up on fair, but actually this is a really good way of thinking about it so that you're not thinking, is this fair? You're thinking, is this acceptable? Can I make this work? Which is way more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And when people see that in terms that they can understand, so not necessarily a spreadsheet or some numbers being thrown at them that they don't understand, but an actual picture that says, right, blue is good, right, the majority of that picture is blue. What do I need to do to make the red go away? Right, well, if we just do that, then the red will go away. Right, that's fine. I know I'm going to be okay then in that case. Yes, let's just settle, because the longer you go on fighting, the more it costs and the
Exactly.
less
Yeah.
money there is to share around.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said at the beginning, the less chance you have of having a successful co parenting relationship, which we know is often people's prime motivator. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So you can model people's futures, you can help them consider proposals that just on numbers alone they may reject out of hand, not without any cause to. You can give, it feels like you can bring that third dimension to a settlement and make it live in order to help people come to agreements. And that feels like it opens up possibilities. So you're a possibility maker.
I like the idea of that.
Yeah, it does. It feels really positive, a really positive way of conceptualizing this. The involvement of an IFA can make more things possible. That's got to be a good thing in divorce negotiations.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are some positive sides to divorce. I mean, and I know it's difficult to see when you're in the midst of it, but actually, you can start to design the life that you want in the future without having to compromise for somebody else's wants and wishes and hopes and desires. You can start thinking about all the things that you wanted to do that you've compromised on in the past, and you don't have to compromise anymore. You can start designing your best life.
It feels like a real watershed moment, doesn't it? So having that professional advice around the finances gives you the opportunities, you say, to create and live the life you want to lead. I love it. I think it's
Yeah,
a really
absolutely.
positive thing. Let's talk a little bit about the mistakes that people can make then. So, when you're looking at finances, what are the common ones people tend to make when they're separating or divorcing?
The biggest one for me is we've agreed we're just going to keep our own pensions.
Right. Okay. Tell me a bit about that.
So, this is a really common one, and I'm going to be generically very sexist now, but what my experience has told me is that quite often the women that I've worked with are really concerned about staying in the family home, the one that they've got at the moment, and the amount of time they're going to be able to spend with their children versus perhaps having to go back to work full time or even going back to work at all. And I know that sounds really 1950s, but it genuinely is still something that crops up a huge amount. And in exchange for that plan, they say, oh, well, yes, but we're just going to keep our own pensions. But the problem is that pensions in marriages tend to be the second biggest asset after the family home, which could mean that you're giving away tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds by just saying, we're just going to keep our pensions. And you could mean that you're working in whatever job you end up doing for an extra 5, 10, 15, in some cases, years that you didn't need to be if you only took a proper look at the pensions, actually understood what their value was to you. And if you do decide to give it up, what it is that you're giving up. And the important thing also to remember is that when the court gets all the information and when you send the proposed financial settlement into it, the judge is looking at whether it looks fair or not. And actually, they can send it back and say, no, it doesn't look fair, even if you've agreed it. So just giving it up and not looking because you don't really understand pensions or you think it sounds quite reasonable isn't a great idea, and pensions need to be looked at properly. There's some ridiculous statistic that I really should have looked up before we started recording about divorced women and their pensions that they have at the end of divorce compared with men who've come out of divorce, and it's something utterly ridiculous.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that we come up against as well is people don't appreciate pensions are a marital asset. They think they're individual assets. And a lot of people don't even have the concept that they should be shared, let alone shared in a way that actually makes them provide equal income in retirement rather than just half of the CETV values, which is very often the way when people don't want to go to the expense of having a full actuarial report that we go. So I think there's so many things counting against women in particular on the pensions. I think it is really important to get some proper advice, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And early as well is another thing that I would say, because getting the pension information together early, requesting the CETVs early, not just assuming that the CETVs are representative. And if it's necessary, speak to a financial advisor or financial planner and say, am I likely to need an actuarial report? That quick question shouldn't need much looking at to answer it if you've got the pension information. If you do need an actuarial report, get it applied for really early on, because the actuaries are so busy at the moment. There's a 20-week delay on the majority of companies that we use. And if you need one, you don't want to get really near the end of negotiations and then it be 20-week delay.
Yes, you're right. We have this exactly the same problem that always puts people off. Well, obviously the cost, but also the amount of time it takes to get all of that actual aerial information and then the report together. But I think, like you say, if it's the second biggest asset, sometimes it's the biggest asset by a long way. There are some very good pension schemes out there where there are millions of pounds in them over the lifetime allowance, and it then becomes absolutely necessary to get some proper information so that you can work out what's required. But is it right as well? You don't have to have a full actuarial report, do you? There are other ways of looking at pensions, and many IFAs will do kind of modelling to see whether you've got enough money in the pot in order to last you during your retirement years. You can do things like that, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on the types of pensions that both of you have got. And there are some types of pensions that the majority of us who specialise in divorce work wouldn't offer a report on because you really need an actuary. So there will be some circumstances where you need to get an actuarial report, and whatever modelling we can do isn't enough. But certainly in certain circumstances, there absolutely are ways that we can have a look at it and advise you using the modelling that we talked about earlier.
Great. Well, what about then, just to end up as we're coming to the end of time, what about some top tips for becoming financially independent again after divorce? What would you say to someone? Let's say they've been through this process, they've got the divorce behind them. What are the top tips for continuing once they've started on this track of financial enlightenment?
Okay, so I've got 6. So first thing, understand what you need to earn, what you need to save, and what you need to spend to live the life that you really want to live. And under that, having a spending plan and sticking to it. And when I talk about a spending plan, I'm not talking about scrimping and saving every penny other than what you need to pay the bills. What I'm talking about is giving every pound a purpose. So making sure that you understand how much of that money is your fun money, that you can go and do frivolously whatever you like, buying that lovely pair of shoes or that fantastic handbag or that new car or whatever it is. But you have to have some fun money, because otherwise you won't stick to your spending plan. To spend some time understanding financial products and how you can make those work the best for you. So understand, certainly a lot of women don't invest their money because they think investing is scary. They don't find out enough about it. They don't understand enough about it. It seems a bit risky. We concentrate on spending. I put myself in this bracket as well. We concentrate on spending money on our children rather than investing in our future. So those things are really important. Not having bank account fear. So checking your bank account every day. and knowing where you're up to. So again, that sort of fits in with the spending plan, but kind of understanding where your money's going, where you're up to. And also that one can help you to avoid any financial fraud because you spot it straight away. If anyone's taking money out of your bank account that shouldn't be doing, you can see it because you're checking your account every day. I would also advocate having a weekly money date. So I know that doesn't sound terribly exciting, but you can check in with yourself as to where you're up to, tick off the bills that have been paid that month, make sure you know you've got enough left for the rest of the month, see what fun money you've got left to do really good things. And it's really nice when you start seeing your savings building up as well, and you can have a check in with that, and you know that that's paying for your fantastic future life that you've designed. And I suppose lastly, my sixth one would be, it is worth considering working with a financial planner because they can help you to devise your financial future, to give you clarity and peace of mind about what steps you could take to make the best and the most of the money that you have.
Brilliant tips, Tamsin. And I feel myself making a money date with myself right now as we speak. I feel like I'm putting myself to shame. I'm secretly going red, I think, behind the microphone thinking, right, I'm really going to have to sort out my financial life now. It's been
bless you.
lovely talking to you. A really, really good detailed walk through the kinds of things that we need to be aware of, not just before we're divorcing, during divorcing, but after, post-divorce as well. So thank you. That's been absolutely brilliant. And hopefully we'll get to chat again soon.
Hopefully. Thank you for having me.
That's brilliant. Tamsin, where can people find out more about you?
So our website is smartdivorce.co.uk, or we have Instagram, we are Smart Divorce. We've got a Facebook page, which is also Smart Divorce. So any of those things, I'm on LinkedIn as well, Tamsin Caine. So yeah, pretty much everywhere.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure you'll have a whole bunch of people fighting a path to your door after this. So thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Tamsin Caine. Thank you very much. And if you enjoyed listening, you can find more of our podcasts and subscribe for updates by visiting thedivorcepodcast.com.